Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Chai with Startup CEOs. Today, I'm joined by Ahana Banerjee. She is the co-founder of Clear, formerly How Technologies, and most of us would know her sort of by like Ahana, but I know her as Ahana Banana on Clear's sort of usernames and things like that. So she's super popular on there. In fact, she's verified as well. Convenient. I guess the perks of building your own social network. How are you doing, Ahana?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to be on, Joel. Can't wait to be grilled by you for the next hour. Excited to be chatting with you.
Yeah, awesome. So, Ahana, tell me about sort of like why you sort of thought there was a need for a social skincare app.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this goes back a couple of years, but I myself have had really, really bad skin issues growing up. It kind of started in my teens. I got quite bad acne. And things just kind of snowballed from there. And even though I was fortunate, I had access to a dermatologist, I still couldn't sort my skin problems, because even if you go to a dermatologist, sometimes they don't give you enough information. And if you don't fully understand skincare, it can be difficult to actually figure out how to address your problems. And so what I did when I was maybe 15, 16 years old was just Google what was happening to my skin. And when I did that, I realized how much content there was online. And in fact, people were learning far more about skincare from social media platforms. So it wasn't even through blogs or articles, it was through Reddit and through Facebook groups and through Instagram pages. And there's such an online community in the skincare space, and there's such a strong community as well. But there's no single place that they all hang out. There's loads of skincare YouTubers and skincare people on Instagram and on Reddit and Facebook, but there's no go-to platform for the skincare community. So that was kind of the first thing that I realized, that wow, there are so many people, they're super active and they're giving some really helpful advice. And I learned so much about skincare, and I've quite nicely managed to clear my skin from reading this information and building Clear now. But I think it was noticing the way that people are learning is changing. It's not through reading textbooks or reading articles. It's through interacting with other people, finding people with your skin. And the limitations with the existing platforms is that, they're great for social media, but they're not optimized for skincare. So when it comes to things like, sharing your routine or finding other people with your skin type, or just like having an optimized skincare experience, leaving a review, you can't really do that as well. On YouTube, you have to link things in the description. It's not optimal. On Instagram, you also can't really link things in the same way. You can't actually see what people are using day in, day out. And being a sufferer in the space for so many years myself, and doing pretty extensive research as well. I think in January, we did about 300 in-depth case studies with different people who use social media platforms to learn about skincare. We realized how many problems there are in one's skincare journey, and we really built Clear to address some of those problems that we found.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. And when you say it like that, I guess I wouldn't be too comfortable posting about my skincare on an Instagram or whatever it is, because it's just even if you kick it in the context of, I post entrepreneurship content plus lifestyle content, I guess, on Instagram, and I feel that the proportion of engagement on entrepreneurship related content is significantly less compared to that of lifestyle related content. I would say it's probably a similar thing in the context of skincare. If I posted something about acne or whatever it is, then perhaps people might judge me more rather than sort of try and help me out or sort of recommend someone else's page or to me or something like that, in that sense.
I think it's less of that with skincare, because the community is pretty wholesome as far as online groups of people go.
Yeah.
It's more just that from the user experience, you're in a position, let's say you've got a breakout, you don't know what to do. Instagram isn't optimized for that. It's not an obvious solution as to how you get the advice, which is why we've built a platform to address the skincare community specifically.
No, absolutely. And sort of on the sort of facilitating that piece, you've been doing you've been running your beta and sort of gone past that even, I presume, by now. So tell us about the best practices that you've had in beta testing, essentially. And you mentioned in some of your YouTube videos that was super important to create feedback loops and stuff. So tell us about how you went about doing that. most effective way? Because I know it's something a lot of entrepreneurs struggle to do with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say, I could break it down into a couple of steps. The first was identifying who to beta test with. And for something like skincare, at first people think it's like, oh, it's only teenagers with acne. But what people don't realize is that, especially for women, you start with acne in your teens, then before you know it, you're getting wrinkly, then you have babies, you get hyperpigmentation and melasma, and then you actually get old and then you get wrinkly again. So, the skin issues never actually end, which in turn means that we have a very wide target audience. And so for us, it was important to actually interview all of these different people, test the app with young people and with slightly older people, but make a note of who is saying what, because especially when it comes to things like UX testing and seeing how intuitive a feature is, oftentimes a young person who's grown up with Snapchat or Instagram finds everything really easy. Someone who's a bit older is really, really struggling. And so the purpose of that was just to see, it was kind of to calibrate each of the features. But the way we did it was we first spec'd out all of the features that we wanted to add for like version 0. What's the minimum app that we can put in front of people? And for that, myself and my co-founder Ben, we were heads down coding for a month straight, and we got to that absolute basic version. But it was still a little bit buggy, like it wasn't fully built out, a lot of the features weren't fully there, but we had at least something that we could put in front of people and do a walkthrough of. So step one was finding those people. And another benefit of me having, well, it's not a benefit, but having suffered with skincare issues for so long, is that I already had somewhat of a presence on various online communities. So it was pretty much just a matter of saying like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I want to chat with you about your skincare routines and show you what I'm working on. And I had a pretty good response rate for it. So our beta community was a little over 100 people. So we had quite a large beta community as far as things go. And we sat down one-on-one, and I actually audio recorded each interview I did, and I had a list of questions to go through. Some of them were more open-ended, and to get the user a bit warmed up, it's just, like, tell me about your skincare routine, and leave it really, really open. But then after that, I would ask them to do different tasks and basically just record what they did. So I'd say, okay, go ahead and make an account. And then that tests our registration flow. Does anything break? What button do they click on first? And for me, we did it through screen sharing. So it was really helpful to see how people were thinking, how they'd react. And so I did all these interviews pretty systematically, wrote down like exactly what they did, what happened. I do about, I think it was like 8 or so interviews every day. So it was quite like back to back, and it was pretty long days. And they were all an hour long as well. So long meetings, but it was worth it though, because it gave us such good feedback and helped us iterate. So I would do these meetings, and then at the end of every day, I'd go through all of the notes and figure out what the key trends were, and then translate the feedback from the calls into issues on the GitHub so that we could actually implement the feedback back into the app as soon as possible. And that was probably the hardest part of the process, was actually figuring out like, what do we include, what do we not? Because sometimes different people have different opinions on what feature they like or what they don't like. And I think balancing like, not whose opinion is more valid, but it's like who is more aligned with our exact target demographic, which was hard for us because we got a wide one. But figuring out, this is what people are doing, these were their behaviors, how does this translate to features on the app that we should add? And that was something that I did every night, basically, just so that I stayed on top of it. Otherwise, you forget what people said. And then at the end of the week, I'd go through like all the meetings I'd done with my co-founder Ben. We chat about like what should be added, what the highest priority things are. We do some prioritization together. And at the time, I was still doing the coding. So then we'd like simultaneously be coding and beta testing.
Wow, that sounds intense. I mean, like I know about how the in-depth sort of user interviews work, and like having 8 a day, that sounds mental to me. Like it's quite a lot. But then on sort of like getting your app approved and things like that on like app stores and stuff, we often hear a bit of taboo around it. Like I was speaking to the founder of a snack app the other day, and it's like basically video meets dating kind of a thing. And she was saying like she had to sort of pull some strings to sort of like get her app in there, which is I mean, like, I guess maybe it's because it's dating, or maybe it's that particular segment that's harder to get approved. Do you face a similar struggle, or is it not so much the case?
For us, we didn't. That said, there's nothing really sensitive about what Clear stores right now. The thing that will be interesting to see is with our debit card, because then you are storing financial data, which is more sensitive than anything we're doing now.
Yeah.
So I suspect we will have to jump through a couple more hoops. But to be honest, as of now, we've done a couple of App Store updates and it's been fairly smooth each time. Not to at Google, but the Android updates always take a bit longer. I think with App Store, though, we've had most of them done within 2 days. So it's been quite straight. I think of everything, this startup journey has been a roller coaster, but submitting to the App Store has actually been one of the few things that hasn't gone on fire and blown up in our faces.
Yeah, that's good to hear, definitely. And you've said again on your YouTube channel. By the way, I love the YouTube channel. Just FYI, you should keep doing that 100%.
Thank you.
But like you said that you see a fintech solution coming, and you just mentioned the debit card as well. Tell us about why you're introducing this piece into Clear and sort of what you see the community gaining out of it.
Sure. So, I mentioned when we did these interviews, we were identifying problems that people faced. And, we identified one, that people don't know what to use. The second, that people don't know whether it's working. And the third, that skincare is too expensive and they spend too much money on it. Yeah. And Clear, without a fintech solution, addresses the first 2 points. We have a diary that helps you figure out what's working. We have a social feed. You can find people by skin types. That kind of helps you figure out what to use in the first place. But it doesn't actually help you get skincare for cheaper. I guess the only way it does that is it helps you make better decisions, more informed decisions, so you're not wasting as much money. But it doesn't fundamentally change the payments side of things. You're still spending the same amount on a product as you would. So I started thinking if there was anything we could do to try and make this different, make this better for people. Because I think in the UK on average, this is across all age ranges, males, females. They spend £500 a year on skincare. And of course, for some people, that's way higher. For some people, that's way lower. But the point is, for a lot of people, it is a significant expense. And it's something that can make a difference to the access you have to certain products. And so I started just thinking, what can we do to actually make skincare more accessible? And there were actually companies in our batch in YC that were doing sort of optimized payments within a very specific vertical. So there's a company that's making the debit card for gamers. And I was really curious about what that meant in the first place. And essentially, it's taking an industry and it's making the best way to pay for things there. And the more I looked into it, the more I realized that there's very little innovation in skincare payments, which is wild because there is so much money spent on skincare. I think it's like a $200 billion industry. People spend so much money on it, but there's just nothing to make payments better. So the more research I did, the more I realized that, okay, well, if they're issuing a debit card, how does a debit card actually make money? And how does it make it cheaper for people? And what I realized is that once you give enough sales volume to certain brands, they will actually give you as the company a discount, and then you can give that straight to your users if they buy through your card. And initially, to fuel that growth, you can actually use the interchange revenue that you generate from the debit card, give it straight back to the user. So even at an early stage when you don't have the traction, you don't have the volumes, you can still give people discounts on their skincare. So I thought this was actually a pretty neat idea because currently the only monetization in the app is through affiliate links. So all of the products we have are through affiliate partners, which is great. We've got over 15,000 of them. So it's pretty extensive, but it's not super lucrative. And it doesn't change the experience for the user. It means we make some money on the transaction. It doesn't mean the user gets anything off. But with debit cards, the user can actually get products for cheaper and we make interchange revenue on it. So it's better for them and it's better for us, and it's the same experience for the company at the end of it who's selling the skincare. And from there, what it allows us to do is also expand more to more financial products. So another example, an obvious one, is credit cards. The reason we're not starting with them is because they're a bit more complicated. When you issue credit, there's more things involved, there's interest payments. We don't want to deal with that right now. But it's a similar user behavior and the functionality in the app is very similar. And then even longer term, what we can do is we can start offering business bank accounts to people. because if you're an online retailer, or let's say you're a small company, you want to sell your skincare to people, you might build a Shopify website, or you might even build your own website and use a payments processor like Stripe to process your payments. But Stripe will take a cut on every transaction. Let's say it's 3%. What we can do is we can say, look, everyone is buying their skincare with their Clear card because it's the best way to buy skincare. If you open a Clear business bank account, basically it's equivalent to you putting money from your current account to your savings account. Because it's the same bank account, there's no transaction fees. So for us, it doesn't cost us anything to move money from a Clear user account to a Clear business account. So what we can say is, well, Stripe's charging you 3%, we'll charge you 0.3%. And for them, they make a hell of a lot more money, and we also make money from the transaction. So I think it's an interesting way to look at monetization, because other things we considered were freemium type models. But the issue with that is it kind of goes against our whole value of inclusivity and transparency and offering the best app and information to people. But if we can still do that, we don't need to charge for the app ever. It's completely free. Opening a debit account is completely free as well. If we can keep as much information and value for free while still making sure that we can sustain ourselves as a business, it's like kind of a best of both worlds. So that's why we went about it the way that we did.
My mind is just like blown right now. I did not see this coming. Okay, so there's a lot to unpack in there. And there's so many different business models that you can tap into once you've developed this community. I think that's the advantageous piece for sure. And you're able to create sort of a committed and curated kind of community, and that's super important. Tell us about how you go about sort of establishing a partnership with the likes of like MasterCard, or first of all, just heads up, this title is totally going to be clickbait. Like, it's going to be like social skincare app becomes a bank. Like,
Oh no, I love it. We've been thinking about how we can clickbait it as well, and it's like free money for everyone. You know what? If it gets the views, it gets the views.
But then, tell us about the MasterCard piece. Yeah.
Sure. So, luckily for us, we don't have to do the groundwork. We don't have to go to MasterCard directly, because there's a whole layer of companies that offer open banking and card issuance services. So they are like banking as a service companies, essentially, who handle all the difficult stuff. Because if you think about it, we are essentially, in a way, becoming a bank, which is not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of regulation involved, a lot of compliance hurdles, and it would take us a long time if we went to MasterCard and like the UK government and figured out how to open our own bank. So luckily, there's all these other companies that sort of serve as the layer between the bank and startups like us who want to offer financial services, which means that they deal with all the boring stuff with, how the funds move, making sure everything is compliant. And all we have to do is integrate their APIs into our database systems and create the front end so that people can access the services through our app. So everything will be Clear branded. The app itself, you'll access your card from the existing app, you'll manage everything in one place. And the card itself will be a Clear card. So you won't have as a user, you won't have any interaction with the middle layer. But for us, we are powered by this middle layer bank. And this is kind of a perk of being a YC company, is that oftentimes, even to use these banks, you have to have a lot of money in reserves and have raised a lot of capital to just put in a pot in case something goes wrong, because you're handling large sums of money. But by virtue of being a YC company, some of these banking as a service companies allow us to start these accounts without having like 50 grand sat in a bank, which for us as a fairly new company is a huge advantage, because it's a risk for us to dump 50 grand into a bank and just be like, okay, this is our reserve money, we're not going to touch it. We need every penny that we've got. So we can basically get this going as fast as we can develop it. And we are in development right now. So in short, we are very lucky that we don't have to do the really difficult, gnarly compliance legal stuff. We just have to integrate the existing APIs, which are things like, how do you get the money from the user's Barclays account to their Clear debit account? And they've built that out. All we have to do is link it with our systems and make sure everything's in one place. So they're honestly amazing companies, and there's so many people doing really cool things, and quite a lot of them offer features like this as well.
Wow.
So yeah, it's been an awesome learning.
Amazing. That's wow. Okay, I just feel like I'm still in a bit of a state of shock, sorry, like on how this is going. So my apologies on that.
It's all right. So was I. At first, I was like, yeah, I want to launch a card, and I had no idea how any of this could work. But it's just something. The more you speak to people, and I think this is another advantage of the YC community. There's a couple of people in the fintech space, and they've been so open to chat with. And I asked all the stupid questions. But how does a debit card make money? Like, what is interchange? I don't get it.
Yeah.
But people have been very patient with me and explained it 100 times. So finally, it's registered in my head.
No, definitely.
Try and articulate it.
Yeah, fair enough. And sort of, you mentioned YC, obviously, and it is huge, like, to get into Y Combinator, and especially like being possibly, you had a sort of machine learning automation, something like that, sort of a company before as well. So you're not a first-time founder per se, but you're still a young founder, and it's not the easiest to do that when you don't have to go into YC when you don't have years of industry experience or something like that. There's always this thing about sort of problem, founder fit, and like all the different things that they could possibly come up with. But tell us about the YC process and like how you would recommend someone does it, and the interview, because I've heard that those are like just fast and like you forget that it happened kind of thing almost as soon as it's done, because it's so quick. So
yeah,
tell me about that, because I've done this application, I've done it before, and sort of gone back and forth with them a little bit, but then had my own shares of ups and downs with whatever we were looking at the time. But like, tell us about the best practices that go into this application and the interview especially.
Sure. So, I mean, for us, it was quite a story. When YC was first on my radar, I actually didn't know what it was. Full transparency. Yeah. I was very much, into my banking, finance, like ready to start like my grad job, just finished my was just about to start my internship. And so I knew like the Goldman Sachs's, I knew all the consulting stuff, the McKinseys, the BCGs. I had no idea about VC firms. Like I didn't know who, whatever, Sequoia, Andreessen Horowitz, it all meant nothing to me at the time. And it was my co-founder who'd actually just done a year at MIT. And he came back to the UK and he was talking about YC, saying that there were some of the alumni from MIT that did this program and they learned so much from it. And the Airbnb guys did this and it helped them loads. And I was like, okay, sounds cool. Not sure we're quite at that level, because when he said this, I think we'd worked on Quill, which was the machine learning, like meeting minutes automation idea, for maybe like 2 weeks. We were very, very early stage. And he was just like, yeah, it's cool. Like, we'll never get in, but it's a cool thing. And I was like, okay, like, what's their website? Like, tell me more. And I saw their website, saw they had a form. And honestly, like, I've spent my last 4 years at uni applying for internships left, right, and center. So if I see a form, like, I am applying for it straight away. I don't care what it is, which is why it's funny. I look at my like job applications. I was applying to like prop trading jobs, like consulting, banking, like literally anything. So I like filling in a form. Yeah. So I saw the YC form and I thought, excellent, another form for me to fill. So honestly, like I almost feel a bit guilty saying it, but we didn't put that much effort into it, just because we were like, there is no chance this works out. We're 2-week-old entrepreneurs, 0 prior experience. Like we've all got our jobs lined up for after we graduate anyway. But let's give it a go. And now in hindsight, I honestly think that it's because I've done so many of these job applications, I've become fairly decent at filling out these application forms and selling ourselves as a team on a piece of paper. So I think, my advice to people filling out the application is just be very straight to the point. They don't like flowery language. They don't like if you use overly technical jargon. And thankfully, like I also don't like using those sorts of words. I don't know what they mean. So I explain things quite simply and just, again, straight to the point, highlighted the positives of our team, was very open about our lack of experience and where we fell short as well. And my co-founders were so convinced nothing would happen, they didn't even read over the application. So to this day, I don't think they know what I actually wrote on it. I have told them to read it, but whatever. It was truly like, this will never happen. Like, we don't really care. Like, you can fill this form in, but A month after we submit the application, we get an email back from them. And as you can probably imagine, we were absolutely flabbergasted. We couldn't believe that we'd got selected for an interview. And I think at that point, we really changed our approach to our company, because before that, it was very theoretical. We approached it like an academic project. So we were researching algorithms. We wrote this basically research paper on how we build it, but we didn't talk to a single customer. We didn't actually build anything. So when we found out we got the interview, I think the first thing we did was enroll in YC Startup School. And we messaged like any random person on LinkedIn who we saw had done YC to ask them about the process. And I won't name names, but the guy was very blunt with us. I don't think he was particularly impressed by us either. And he was like, what, you've been doing this for 2 months and you haven't launched? Like, well, that's a bit of a joke. You need to hurry up and launch something. And so we felt really awful and like really bad after that. But in fairness, his advice was right. We did need to launch something and get it out. So we shifted gears. We started building our alpha version of Quill. I was doing, again, like beta tests, like trying to get LOIs, pilot programs, like crazy. This was at the same time as university though. So that was like a whole thing, managing the two. But that's a separate story. So we were very fortunate that we had 2 months from finding out that we had the YC interview to actually having the interview. So we had time to fix the business. We had time to launch, get customers, all of that. So we tried our hardest, and we did try very, very hard. And because we weren't even expecting an interview, the fact that we got one meant that I think we tried extra hard to try and nail the interview. So we did, we spoke to a lot of alumni, we got all the question banks, we really asked ourselves the hard questions. And I think in some of them, there's things like, oh, which of your co-founder is like the least valuable and why? Like really mean questions, just for the sake of like, worst case scenario, if they ask us something horrible, we've got an answer. And YC are known to sometimes do things like say, oh, like, we don't like your idea, like, what else you got? So we prepared for all of these, and we did prepare. And so anyway, the interview happened. It was the second to last week of term. We'd begged all of our professors for extensions on our like coursework deadlines, things like that. And we had the interview, and as you said, it was very, very fast. Went on for 10 minutes, no pleasantries or anything, just straight to the point. And
was the
honestly, we couldn't tell
who interviewed you.
So we had 3 interviewers. I don't even remember. I think it was two ladies, 1 man. There was literally no introduction. It was just like, what are you building? And then we were there like lambs being sent to slaughter. But anyway, we had the interviews, and the thing is, Ben and I in particular, like we'd practiced, we'd figured out who was answering what sort of questions. So, we knew certain questions in one area, like I would take them, and like more tech questions, like he would take. So, we were ready in that sense, but it's really hard to judge like how you've done, because they literally give nothing away. They ask questions until the very end, and then they're like, okay, bye, and then the Zoom call ends. And so we had the interview, and the other thing is that YC tells you to be available for the next, I think it's 6 hours following your interview in case they have any follow-up questions or they want another interview. And for us, our interview was at around 10 p.m.
Oh, God.
And so that meant we had to stay up till 4 a.m. UK time, because everything was done in Pacific time. And so as you can imagine, we are like having heart palpitations. And the thing is, we knew that if you're successful, you get a call. If you're unsuccessful, you get an email. So we were there, and that night we got 4 emails. And every time like the email thing went off, it was like, great, like it's done. Like it was, well, at least we tried.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of follow-up questions, basically. They were confused about our degrees, like if we were still students or not. They weren't sure like how married we were to the idea, how long we'd been working on it. And so they just wanted to clarify a few points. And then finally, I think it was just after 4 a.m., we get a long email. I saw the long email and I was like, okay, that's it. Like,
unfortunately, because of XYZ.
Literally, yeah. And so I was like, okay, well, at least we tried. And then I read it, and what it actually said was that, like, here's the deal. we like you, we don't like your idea. And I think in that email, they were particularly vague. They were just like, oh, we've seen companies try this before, and it's just never worked before. We don't know if it's because there's not enough need for it. And you guys are too early stage for us to know if you've actually got a different take on this. So what we propose is that we talk to you again next week, come up with something better, or show us more traction on Quill. So there were some pros and cons to this email. The pro is that they said they liked us and that we had another chance. The con was that we were like, what do we do? Like, we didn't have a backup idea. So we were like very mixed emotions. We were absolutely exhausted. And I think the day after our interview, like, we just took a day off and just like tried to get back to a decent mental space. And then on the Sunday, we literally spent the day planning every single hour of the next week, literally down to the hour. This is what I will do from like 9 till 10. From 10 to 11, I'll do this. And we time blocked everything for the next week because we had exactly a week till our next interview. We also had all of our uni deadlines, and my CTO at the time, he also had exams every day that week. So it was honestly like a nightmare time. But in that week, we decided to do both things. We decided to get more pilot programs of Quill and also have a backup idea and get a prototype, put it in front of someone. But we didn't know what the backup idea would be. And I think the brainstorm for our next idea was only on the Tuesday. Our interview was on a Friday. And so it was during the brainstorm that Ben and I were talking, and we were trying to think of problems that we'd encountered more closely, because one of the downsides to us working on Quill is that, yes, we've sat in meetings, but we're by no means meeting experts or project managers or behavioral psychologists. You know, we don't have unique insights there. So we were looking in like the student space, like moving internationally or like having tight budgets, like what problems have we felt? And it was actually when I took a toilet break and I saw my array of skincare that I thought, I spend all my free time watching skincare YouTube videos, and I know a lot about this, and I really struggled with this, and I'm still struggling with it. And I think because of like the sleep deprivation at the time, my skin was also a mess around the time of the YC interview. Then I came running back and I was like, actually, there's this whole space that I know a lot about already. Like, we don't need to do market research because I've spent years doing it. And then from there, Hout version 1 was born, Hout's now being clear. And at the time, it was an idea. It was an app that scans your face and recommends products on the market to you. Certain companies have this, but we would have a brand agnostic version. So it wouldn't be like to push just one product line. It would be fair. So we just came up with it. We built a landing page that day. I think in that week we drove around 300 people to it. I just begged anyone I could to like share it with their friends, family, cousins, aunts, uncles, dogs, like whoever would take it, like to sign up for this wait list, like please just do it. And then I think I also did around 60 user interviews. So similarly, any friend I had, I was like, can you please just talk to me? I want to ask you about skincare. And I think one of the biggest learnings from this whole experience is you just can't be afraid of like rejection or being turned down. You just have to ask people for things all the time. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything. And so I just begged anyone who would speak to me to talk to me so I could gain some more solid numbers and insights. And then CTO at the time, he had exams, I said, every day. They ended at 12 p.m. on the Friday. The interview was at 10 p.m. So then from 12 till 8, he builds like Hout version 1. He builds the prototype in those 8 hours. Then from 8 till 10, I do 4 user demos. And then at like, I think the interview is actually at 10:30. So we were absolutely exhausted, as you can imagine. We didn't know what we were expecting. We didn't know who was interviewing us. We just showed up at the like Zoom when they told us to. And it was a very different interview. So this was just with the head of admissions, and it went on for an hour. And we knew it was different when she said hello to us. She asked how we were doing. We're like, okay, this is not the same as the last interview. And it was very open-ended. So this time, you know, she didn't come and attack us with questions. She said, what do you guys want to talk about? And we told her, like, look, we've done both. Like, here's the extra traction we've got on Quill. These are the concerns you had. We've addressed them like this. But we also came up with this idea, and we've made this much progress and got this much traction already, and it's been 4 days. So we can go into both. And we really dove into the details of both businesses. And we could tell this time that the conversation was going really well. Like, she was showing like that she was learning something, that she was quite impressed by us. So I was feeling like pretty good. But then after an hour of this, and keep in mind it's like close to, I think, like 11:30ish by now, she's like, all right guys, well, it was lovely to chat with you. You've got my email if you need anything. Bye. And I was like,
What?
okay, bye. Like, so what's happened? And then I was like kind of devastated. I was like, oh, but it went so well. We've done so much work. Like, is that the end of our relationship? And so then I go straight back into business mode and I start drafting my angry email being like, look, we have this other investor interested. If you don't do this by Monday, we're never applying to YC again. Thank God I didn't send that.
My God.
But I was in full heat of the moment, like drafting this email. And as I'm doing it, I see an email from her pop up in my inbox at that moment. This was about 5 minutes after the interview. And it was her asking me if she could jump back onto the call. And then when she did, it was to break the good news. And again, as you can imagine, Joel, we were like we were so flustered from like the 2 weeks that had just happened. We didn't know how to respond. She was just like, yep, the batch starts on the 5th, like it's in 2 weeks. Incorporate your company in the US, figure out which idea you want to work on, open a bank account, see you in 2 weeks.
What?
And we were just like, did that really just happen? So yeah, it was wild. So we spent Christmas, like the Christmas that just went, doing all of the legal like incorporation stuff, and then we hit the ground running in January, and it's been non-stop since. And we also had to withdraw from our degrees as well, so that was like a whole thing.
You'd drop out?
It was past midnight. We'd just broken. So we went on an interruption of studies, but it's a bit complicated because we were on integrated master's degrees. So I actually got my bachelor's last year. And like, to be honest, I hated my degree. I was looking for reasons to leave it. So for me, it was like a lottery ticket. Like, yes, I can finally leave this with a good reason. But it was just a bit uncomfortable because the term had just ended and like everyone had gone on holiday, and at midnight we're emailing them like, please, we need to talk to you right now, like we need to make this happen. But our department was super understanding, and we'd already given them a heads up, like it's a 1 in a million chance that this happens, but like we are working on this startup alongside uni, like something might happen. So they were really understanding, and it was all very easy from that side.
Oh my God.
So yeah, we've been working full time.
Oh
since
no!
January.
Oh my God! This whole story, my anxiety has been through the roof. Like, 'cause I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, I was sleepless, I think, for a week because we applied early, and that means that you sort of hear back within the next 2 weeks, kind of a thing, or something like that. And I think because again, Pacific time, kind of a thing, and I was in Dubai at the time, so I was up pretty late, like waiting for those emails, and then in between there was like they had a clarification. I'm like, yes, we got a clarification. That must mean something good, right? But like, yeah, I think in my case, I sort of ended up over communicating the kind of problems that we were facing with the startup to them, because when you don't hear anything back for a while, you're sending emails to them. You're just like, okay, update. This is what happened. That is what happened. Like, you know what I mean? So I don't know, maybe that was a bad approach, but oh my God, like your experience sounds absolutely insane. The YouTube title has now officially changed to How I Got My YC Startup Idea in 1 week. And got it to the voice.
I mean, if you look on my channel, that's not too far off.
Okay.
The title,
Okay, fair enough. Well, original content, all about that. But then, yeah. So like, I mean, I wanted to ask you more questions around like, how you sort of like learned code and stuff like that in like just a week's time. But I remember you saying that you already done Python, and then you were just like sort of learning the app piece. But then after what you just said, I feel like anything I ask after that is just going to be like super underwhelming. Like, to anyone that understands the stresses of this process, this was huge. What you just shared was like super in-depth stuff. So okay, final question for you, right? So Gen Z sort of entrepreneurs, right? Like a lot of us out there today, in fact, 61% of Gen Z want to be entrepreneurs at some point. And like, how do you sort of like doing what you do right now is not easy. Like you just spoke about potentially evolving into a bank. Like that's not a lightweight for any university graduate or early 20-somethings like to even think about. So like what are like your few pieces of advice to sort of those young people that are trying to make it out there today? Like, and where will they sort of face the biggest obstacles? How do they push back?
I think that the single biggest piece of advice I can give is just get experience, try things, intern in startups, like try and learn as much as you can what the experience is really like, because honestly I don't think it's for everyone. Like, as I've just gone through with that story, and we've had so many more setbacks where things have happened. Like when we actually got into YC, this was a part of the story I left out, but our CTO left us. That's a huge setback, and we'd already kind of felt like imposters getting into YC. They'd accepted us on the team basis, and now the team was like falling apart. What do you do in these situations? And you need the ability to stay calm in very stressful situations and figure out a solution. Like, it's not just about staying calm, like composing yourself. It's about being able to think and actually thrive when things go wrong. And the only way you gain experience doing that is if you deal with it firsthand. There are no like courses or textbooks you can read on how to do this. And for me, like the first exposure to entrepreneurship I had was in my second year when I worked at another early stage startup. I just did it alongside uni. It was unpaid, but I learned so much just from that, seeing how a startup operates, how you communicate with people, like how you just have to come up with things to get other things done. And that helped me a lot. I think the other thing was also the fact that I've always had a really wide range of interests and done a lot of different societies from school time, like all the way through uni to now. Even though now all I do is work, the job is so multifaceted, and you have to enjoy talking to people. You have to be able to sell yourself to an investor. You have to figure out how to start a YouTube channel. And to be completely honest, I wasn't someone that loved social media before all of this. But it's like, what do I need to do to get this off the ground? How do I gain visibility, exposure? And now I actually really enjoy like the YouTube stuff and like posting on LinkedIn and running our socials. But, this was all learned stuff. Like, I didn't come out of the womb knowing how to do this. You have to just be very open to learning and I touched on this earlier, but very open to rejection and failure, because I've just told you the story of how we got into YC. That was a massive win for us. It was life-changing, to be honest. But there were so many other setbacks. At the end of that story I mentioned, there was the other investor who was interested. They weren't in the end. They didn't want to invest. We applied for every accelerator program our university had. We didn't get into any of them. Like, we had only had rejections before that. Over the summer, when we got the YC acceptance, we were being strung along by another VC, and they were like, oh, we'll give you $1 million to drop out of your degrees and do this full time. And we believed them. Obviously it didn't happen, right? And like things like this happened over and over and over again. We've dealt with some awful people, we've dealt with some amazing people, and these things just happen. And I think you have to just expect that some things will be unpleasant. And in my opinion, this is way harder than any 9-to-5 job. I think the most dangerous thing you can do is be like, oh, I don't want to work a 9-to-5, so I'm going to start a startup. This is so much harder than a 9-to-5 that if that's the reason you're doing this, like, you are making a grave mistake. So I think having some startup experience, knowing what I was getting myself into, and also having experience doing other internships in bigger companies. As I mentioned, I was very much like the type that would apply for loads of internships, things like that. And understanding how to hold yourself to account, like how to run an internship program, like how to make sure you're actually delivering things on time. Some of the things where startups fall short, I think my experience in bigger companies helped me navigate those, which is why we've been able to set milestones, push to achieve them, and have some structure in place while still having the positives of a startup and being agile and changing what we're working on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So, I think all in all, it's just get as much experience as you can and figure out if this is really what you want, because it's not for everyone, and that's completely okay. It's not a better or worse way to live your life. It's just different.
Yeah.
But it is a challenge, and the only thing you can do is, like, to prepare yourself is figure out what it's really like.
Yeah. And sorry, I was gonna wrap with that, but then you just hired like 30 interns as well, by the way, right? Like, so that's a big team. And like setting them, ensuring that each of them is sort of on some, like you mentioned, you worked for a startup when you were in your second year as well. And I'm sure you have experiences of how structured that was. Sure, there was structure in the startup, but particular to what your role looked like in that startup, maybe not so much sort of in terms of like how concrete it was, right? So how do you go about setting that for those 30 people that are looking to you for direction constantly, and setting them on paths that's the best use of their time and your time?
Yeah, so I mean, this was completely different to the internship I did. When I did that internship, it was very much like the founding team looking for another member. So when I was working, like there weren't more interns. It was me and like the founders working together and me potentially joining that team. Whereas for this was much more like how when a bank organizes a summer internship, because I've done so many of these like spring week or summer internships.
Nice.
And I really enjoyed them. I was like, okay, what can I say? No, I mean, it's the type of thing where like, that was the experience that I'd had, and I'd seen how like the HR teams had put things together. And for us, it was a question of, right, we've set these very ambitious targets. We're going to be fundraising in the next month. I alone cannot achieve this. I have tried to get the user numbers and I've done a good job. I can hit 1,000 if I keep going, but that's not going to get me the 5,000. So what can I do to get 5,000? And for us, the type of business we are, numbers help. And especially with a younger demographic, that's what we were missing out on. So I was just like, I want to hire interns who are better with social media. We had no TikTok on Clear, whereas like skincare on TikTok is a massive thing. We don't have access to any of that. How do I make this happen? Because I don't have enough hours in the day to do the Instagram, the LinkedIn, the YouTube, run the business, launch the debit card and do the tech. Like it's too much stuff for me. So I first just wanted to see if people would join. So I put out a message, like I sent something to Imperial, to like universities, the schools, or like alumni networks. And we had a surprisingly large amount of interest. I don't quite know why, but hey, I'll take it. I was happy. So we had about like, I think 40 or 50 people apply for positions with us, which was way more than I was expecting, but I just kind of went with it. I then looked through the CVs. I interviewed the candidates who I was like particularly impressed by, which was still a lot. So 2 weeks ago, I literally, I do like 8 beta tests, but when I was doing the interviews, I think I was doing like 10, like 30-minute calls back to back. It was like quite a lot. It was quite draining, but like I needed to do it quickly because we're going to fundraise in 2 weeks from now. Like I don't have time to waste. So I was doing these interviews, liked most of the candidates, asked them like what, they wanted their time commitment to be, what they wanted to learn, put it all in a spreadsheet, then finished the interviews. I think it was on a Saturday. The internship program started last Monday. So then I had like the rest of the Saturday to figure out, okay, what should they work on? Like, how do I make sure I haven't just wasted a week of interviewing people and they're actually adding value? So I split them into teams of about like four to 5 people. We've got 2 tech teams, 3 business development teams, and 3 marketing teams. And I set very clear KPIs for the length of their internship. So I was like, okay, business development, I want you to get like the debit card team, you need to get 1,000 signups to the debit card waitlist, figure it out. TikTok team, you need to get 1,000 followers on TikTok, post 3 times a week and work with 1 influencer in the next 3 weeks. Figure it out. And then we had like an influencer team and they have to work with each other as well to make things happen. So I think I just set very clear goals and then I gave them a proper onboarding, like fully explained what Clear is, where the company is at, like how they fit into this and like the bigger picture. And then we're also doing things like once a week insight talks, because for a lot of them, it's their first internship and they just want to know what it's like to work in a startup. And I think just giving back to them, we're doing socials on Fridays, like these are all time investments on my part, but the amount of value they've already added, and it's just been a week, has been so worth it. Because I was worried that it wouldn't be. I'd spent so much time, and if they don't add any value, then I've basically screwed up. But they have been incredible, and like it honestly humbles me to have these people like on my team. I can't believe that these people are like working towards a shared goal of mine. So yeah, it's all going good for now. I am being bombarded with Slack messages like 24/7 these days because we've got interns like all the way like in Australia. A lot of them are in Singapore. And then we also hired a developer, like he's in Canada. We've got other people in Mexico. So it's like the Slack messages start at like 4 a.m. and they end at like 4 a.m.
Oh.
It's a lot, but it's worth it. I'm having so much fun. Like the experiences I've had in the last couple of months are like crazy. No grad job could give this to me. But yeah, I'm a little tired. Okay, cool, worth it.
Oh, thank you so much, Ahana, for taking the time. And like, I would love to show up to one of those Friday socials. I'm back in London in a couple of weeks, so definitely we'll hit you up about that. But like, yeah, it's been sort of great having you on and like really learning a lot from you, because like, obviously, we look to those like, I would say, several steps ahead of us to sort of take inspiration from. And I think that you've been able to do that for so many of the other entrepreneurs that are possibly watching this, and like, just absorbing every tiny little detail that you're mentioning, because like you make it sound super simple, but like realistically, like if you think about 300 minutes sitting at a stretch and like interviewing people, the amount of energy that it drains from you as a person is just on another level. So it's super underrated, I think, like, and that too, having the knack to identify the right candidates, that's a whole other ballgame. So, because people turn out to be totally different than their resumes, like. So, definitely been super insightful, Ahana. Thank you so much for taking the time. Everyone watching, don't forget to subscribe to mine and Ahana's channel. Actually, I've never plugged anyone else's channel before, but she deserves a massive subscribe, perhaps more than mine. But then anyways, good luck with all of the sort of the debit card and like the interns and everything that you're doing, the fundraising. I'm so excited to hear about all of the news that comes out from that. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, and we'll have to have you on my channel, and this time I can grill you and you can share your story. Would love to learn more as well.
Sure, anytime. All right.
Fantastic. Lovely to chat with you.
Likewise.